What is up, everybody? It is Alex from Heavy New York. Happy Monday, everybody. And on the phone, we got Des Rocs. Thank you for your time today.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, it's great to have you here, man. You released a couple of new singles out this year, such as I Know and Wayne. Could these serve as maybe like a clear representation on like the direction that Des Rocs is sort of going into?
In a sense, yeah. I mean, I think the direction is that there is no direction, and that the music is just kind of constantly evolving and spiraling out of control, kind of at my whim. I would never want a Des Rock record to sound the same two in a row. So they're always changing and always getting weird.
Yeah. Is there like a preconceived idea on how you want it to sound, or is there kind of like a lot of experimenting and improvising involved?
A lot of experimenting and a lot of improvising. I feel like when you're consciously trying to choose a lane or consciously trying to choose a direction, you're going to do your best work. I mean, your worst work, sorry. And you got to just get in there and get weird, and whatever happens.
Yeah, absolutely. And like what I find unique is that I feel like your music is kind of like on the more experimental side. Like I thought a song like Let Me Live, Let Me Die versus a song like Used to the Darkness versus a song like Maybe I. Like there's like many different realms of experimentation. Clearly trying new things is almost like a specialty for you, right?
Yeah, man, like I'm never satisfied, and I get bored of the same sound really quickly. So for me to just make a blues record and a blues record and a blues-based record in a row is very boring for me. I just want them all to feel like they are the spirit and the vibe of Des Rocs, and that the song itself or the production choices themselves are never constrained by any set of rules.
Yeah, it's almost like fair to say the worst thing that could happen is that you're worried that a Des Rocs song could almost sound too much like a Des Rocs song, right?
Yeah, in a sense. I want you to understand the spirit and the energy of the music I make, but never think that it's a carbon copy of something I've done in the past.
Yeah, like, is there, because it seems like you take inspiration from multiple sources, right? Like, I see people who would love, like, I could just name an artist and I could see people who are fans of that artist be fans of you guys.
Oh, killer, thanks.
Yeah. Is there, like, a key, but is there kind of like an element, because there's always like that damned if you do, damned if you don't scenario. Like if you experiment too much, you're directionless. If you don't experiment enough, you're repetitive. Is there kind of like a fine line in that regard, or are you not even thinking about that?
A little bit of both. I understand that kind of little devil on your shoulder that says like, oh, you don't want to alienate people who already like this sound or that sound. But then I also very much feel a burden as an artist to constantly push creatively as much as I possibly can, and to wade into the deepest waters where I feel very uncomfortable, because I think that's where I'm going to make my best art and contribute to advancing an entire genre of music.
Yeah, I think like comfort could sometimes be the greatest enemy for an artist of any type.
For sure, man. I'm always trying to just flip up my process, flip up where I make records, and just push and push and push. I never want to just be like, oh, here's a nice song. I always want it to be a big swing creatively, and either it's a home run or I whiff and fall on my ass, and anything in the middle there's no space for that today. People put out tens of thousands of records a week. There's a big middle, and I'm going for the tippy top of the craziest records you can make.
That's awesome. Do you almost kind of look at these like these records and EPs like Let the Vultures In and Martyr Parade and Out of My Mind? Do you almost kind of like look at them as like self-portraits or a reflection of who you are at that particular time?
Oh, absolutely. The records are really autobiographical. Very much. I'm a very big proponent of just like write what you know and write what you feel, because that will lend itself to the most honest record you can possibly create. And I feel like some of the greatest artists and entertainers of all time have just kind of stayed true to that mantra, like a Bruce Springsteen. They write what they know and what they live, and it shows and it connects with people.
Yeah, absolutely. Do you need music before like lyrics or a concept is brought into place, or could like maybe a story or these autobiographical elements determine the music itself?
It's always a little bit of both. I write poems often, just like on my phone. I guess it's like a very 20th century kind of poet vibe, like in the notes section of my iPhone. And very often I'll set those to music. very often I'll just come up with an instrumental and I'll scream a single word over it, and that single word will pave the road for an entire song that I didn't even know I wanted to write. So there's really no one way it gets done for me.
So it's fair to say it could come from an internal source, it could come from an external source, like inspiration is always around for you.
Absolutely, inspiration is definitely always around. I wish I knew the exact source of it so I can tap into it all the time, but I don't. It's kind of out of my control. These things are just kind of like wafting through the air, and I just try and grab them.
Yeah, I think it's fair to say that inspiration always strikes at like the most inconvenient times, right?
Oh, absolutely, man. It's always when I'm just about to go to sleep, and then I end up staying up all night. That's a pretty hot time for ideas to hit for whatever reason, and it sucks. I wish I could start at like 10 a.m. That'd be ideal, but it is what it is, you know.
Yeah, I mean, do you like to leave the music open to interpretation, or is the goal to kind of maybe engage the listener into what Des Rocs is all about?
I like to leave it open-ended. I think any art, what makes art so enjoyable and complex is the subjective nature of it, and people being able to ascribe their own meanings and identify their own experiences with certain lyrics is tremendous. In the same way I did growing up, listening to my favorite artists, taking the music and bringing it inward and having that true personal connection is invaluable. So I really try not to ascribe super literal meanings to anything in the music after the fact.
So it's fair to say like the music is almost like metaphorical?
Yeah, absolutely. There's a lot of metaphorical imagery used, and I try not to tell people exactly what those things are rooted in for me personally, because I love seeing people's interpretations of it, and I love seeing how people connect with it in their own ways.
Yeah. Have you ever had like the best lyrics ever, but then they're always like one syllable over every single musical arrangement that you make?
Like just something that just doesn't fit?
Yeah.
I mean? Yeah, well, yeah. If it's not right, it's not right, and I find that in music and in life especially, you might want something to work so badly, and you might want something to be so badly, but sometimes it's just not meant to be.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that the hardest thing for an artist, except with the exception of starting something, is knowing when to end it.
Oh, totally. I mean, I don't consider a song finished until it's on Spotify. It's always a work in progress, and I rarely even listen to it once it's out. It's like just out of sight and out of mind.
Yeah. Do you almost feel like in a Des Rocs album, like you almost kind of like portray a character in a way? Or is music just a direct extension of who you personally are?
It's really like a direct extension in the sense that I think to make music and to sing on a stage and lose yourself in a stage is to inhabit a different part of your psyche. So in a sense you could call that like character, but I'm not sure, man. It's just like, it's almost like an exaggerated sense of self. I'm taking myself and I'm blasting it through amplifiers and speakers and microphones, and I'm very physically and kind of hypothetically exaggerating myself, and that's how I always do it.
Mm-hmm. Have you ever gone overboard? Has there ever been that moment?
Yeah, I mean, I lose my mind every couple of weeks making records. Like, I very much, like, dip my toes into a realm of psychosis. I think making records is inherently pretty psychotic, and, you're literally conjuring voices in your head. Like, you're hearing voices, and you're hearing sounds and melodies, and especially the way I make my records, which is pretty isolated, there's an edge that I cross all the time, and I can just like lose it for a couple of days and go on like this songwriting bender, and then God knows what happens.
Yeah, it almost seems like. Do you find it maybe like the longer you're working on something, the harder it is to sort of like capture a moment in the music?
Yeah, I mean, sometimes you just have this like great spark of an idea, and you spend a couple of days chasing that original idea, and you might never get it, And I wish I could just take what's in my head and just plug a USB into my skull and have it just go recorded to Logic, all ready to rock, like mixed and mastered, But I can't do that. So yes, capturing a moment or an idea as it is in your head is something I'm always trying to do.
Yeah, well, Elon Musk will probably invent something to take care of that issue.
Yeah, I mean that would literally solve so many problems for me. That would be killer.
Yep. Come on, Elon Musk, we're waiting for you.
Yeah, he's got Grimes there. I'm sure she has the same problem.
Of course. And you ready for the most difficult question of the whole interview?
Hit me.
How do you know when a song is done?
When it's on Spotify. That's the only time it's done.
Congratulations! You officially gave me the most you officially gave me the most anticlimactic answer for that question.
Yeah, I mean, I don't have a good sense for it. I feel like you just kind of like you're ready to upload it and send it away from you. It's like sending like a kid to college, I would think. Where it's like you kind of don't want it to go, but it's time, and the deadline is arbitrary. It's like, all right, the kid is 18 years old, and it just is what it is. Some people are ready, some people aren't. But it's time. You got a release date. It's ready to go, and then it just flies away from you. But then the beautiful thing is that live, you get to just continue to evolve it. So I'm always changing the arrangements of records live. I'm always changing the way I sing things live. So it's in a sense like the recorded version might be done at some point, but the song and the spirit of the song itself can always change.
Mm-hmm. And that led me into my next question, because when you're playing live, is there almost kind of like a similar energy that you channel into your live presence as when you're songwriting, or is playing live and songwriting almost two completely separate, different games for you?
Yeah, they're very interconnected. I'm constantly thinking about the live show. Anytime I write and record a record, it's always in my head like what that song is going to feel like when I play it live, and it very much guides the recording process itself.
So you almost consider Rocs to be like a live band or a live performance. It's not like you're more of an album band or a singer-songwriter. You consider this more of a thing that should be experienced live, right?
Yeah, it's absolutely a live experience, and to me it's just like an experience together. I think of Rocs as a living, breathing organism that is growing and changing, and that is complex and has like a psyche all of its own.
Mm-hmm. And do you I'd imagine that when you almost discover new ideas in the middle of a live performance on how you can incorporate it into your songwriting, right?
100%, especially during like rehearsal, and we're just like it's late at night and we're all really tired, and I just like have this idea that I play in guitar that I wouldn't ordinarily play if I was just recording on my own, So they're really complementary art forms. They're always one's always feeding the other.
Like happy accidents, if you will.
Yeah, absolutely. You just do things you wouldn't ordinarily do in a recording setting, and you do things you wouldn't ordinarily do in a live setting, and you get ideas for one another from each of those.
Yeah, I almost feel like also when you're like recording and when you're like in the vocal booth or in your like a studio, it's so dictated. So I'd imagine that the live shows is a lot more liberating, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you can try things in night after night after night after night that you don't ordinarily get that. You don't track vocals in the same song night after night after night after night, So you have this palette that you're allowed to experiment with when you have 30 shows in a row.
Mm-hmm. And have you ever thought about maybe doing a live album just so people could like see how different you are live versus on the album?
Absolutely. I think that's like a bit far off as far as what kind of environment I want to create that in, but it's 100% on the list.
You never know. Like I've interviewed a couple of artists who are against the idea of a live album. They've even called it like a porn on the radio sometimes. So maybe you could break that stigma.
Yeah, I don't know why. I think first of all, to each their own. If you don't want to make a live album, don't make a live album. But for me, like live albums are my favorite albums to listen to because I love hearing what the crowd reacts to. when, and why. And it could just be like a 3-second ad lib or a comment made, or it could be like a rearrangement of a really popular song. But to hear the response of thousands of people in real time is, to me, chilling.
Yeah, absolutely. And of course, a live album is never as good as experiencing a real concert. But, like, I mean, there's so much a live album can, like, capture that you'll never hear on a regular album.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. You know, sometimes, like, I fall in love with live versions of records far more than the recorded version.
Definitely. And I think...
Because, you know...
Oh, you were saying?
I was going to say, like, often the recorded version had some, like, fucking A&R guy. Maybe he had his 2 cents in there. You know what I mean? Or maybe it was a shitty mix or a shitty master. It's just not that great. I feel like a lot of Queen songs, like, the live versions, they were radically experimented with them and created some of my favorite versions of iconic songs and songs that nobody ever knew.
Definitely. And of course, there's some bands that like thrive off of such a crowd and live thing, like Slipknot. You'll, no matter how, after you see that band, you will never listen to them as the same again because of just how amazing the live show itself is. And I feel like for what you have going for you, it's a similar element. Like, you express so much emotion and so much energy, and you get the crowd involved that, you know, not to discredit what we're hearing on the albums, but I feel like that the albums themselves are just like the tip of the iceberg of what Des Rocs is all about.
Yeah, I think of the recording as a gateway drug, you know what I mean? Into a whole universe that kind of lives in my head that I really want you to be a part of. And, yeah, man, music is a complex thing, and we kind of boil it down to, like, live, recorded, artwork, you know? And for me, I can't put anything in those silos. It's like all of the above. It's just, like I was saying, like one big, living, breathing kind of organism.
Yeah, and I feel like the presentation of, like, I love the album artwork that you incorporate on here. I feel like you try to make everything count. The presentation, the live shows, the arrangement of the music. Like, when I was listening to the Let the Vultures In EP, I need to start off with Let Me Live, Let Me Die, and end with The Past Has Passed Away. You know what I mean? Like, it can't be...
Thanks, man.
I don't consider Des Rocs to be a, what I call, shuffle-friendly album.
Yeah, the track listing and all of the above artwork. These are things that I like really labor over, and that I'm really meticulous about, and drive myself absolutely insane up all night thinking about. So I'm glad you said that.
And the final question I wanted to ask you is, being a fellow New York City artist, we just found out upon starting this interview that we're actually neighbors, for those of you guys listening.
Yeah.
But were you involved in, like, the New York City rock and metal scene? Like, were you going to, like, St. Vitus and Lucky 13, hanging out at Duff's? Or do you try, or right now is the goal for you to maybe, like, expand outside the 5 boroughs a little bit more?
Oh, man, I very much grew up coming into the city many times a week, going to shows by myself. 15 years old, 16 years old. Like in Long Island, growing up 30 minutes outside the city, it was all emo and punk and hardcore and a lot of screamo music. And, you know, when I wasn't going to shows in Long Island at, like, the rec centers and, like, the synagogues that would have shows, which is just blows my mind to think about today, I would be coming to the city, and I would sneak into clubs and bars at 15, 16 and just get my ass kicked and then go home on the train. And it was just like, I don't think I was really part of a scene. I always felt like kind of like a lone man wolf who would always just, like, go to these things alone and go see shows. And I would also play these shows just in, like, the shitty ass punk bands I was in when I was a kid.
Well, the lone wolves I always see at shows are usually the ones who end up creating very, very unique art. Every time I go to a show, especially like a hardcore show, and I see that one socially awkward guy, like, standing in the corner, like, I just say to myself, yeah, that guy's going to make a kick-ass album one day.
Yeah, well, I was also, like, I was very much like a cultural observer and a participant, you know? So I didn't, like, really dress like anybody dressed. I just kind of, like, yeah, man, I was very much just, like, an observer of the world. And the influences I had, I always had a problem with just being a devotee of one thing. You know, there were, like, hardcore kids, there were the punk kids, there were the emo kids, and I very much, like, loved everything musically, and I love that just as much as I love Bruce Springsteen. And I love that just as much as I love Queen. So I was kind of trying to make these big arena anthemic records to like 80 kids in a rec center, and I was very much the odd man out in that sense, especially when I went to shows too and I would just watch. But I think that those same kind of principles guide a lot of what I do today.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's very evident in your music. I see like a variety of different sounds, as I mentioned before. So it almost seems like every culture that you were observing and every experiences seem to be brought into what Des Rocs is all about.
Thanks, man. I think especially today, like, we can access any sound on the planet, any synthesizer, any drum loop, anything. And to just be like, I'm going to just make this one type of thing, when you have every paintbrush and color imaginable at your disposal, is so boring to me. And it's like, and especially when it's all already been done before. You know what I mean? So it's like, there's better versions of that in the past. So why not just experiment with all these things and make new music and new art?
Yeah, and don't compartmentalize it too much either. Like, everybody is so like, I only like this, or I only listen to that. Like, it seems like for you, you were the type of guy who was just like, all right, emo, punk, hardcore, rock, I'll just experience all of it.
Yeah, absolutely. It's all washing around. I mean, I think very much a kid who loves Slipknot today also fucks with Travis Scott. You know what I mean? There's like all these giant overlaps and Venn diagrams that there wasn't in the past. And to ignore that is to just kind of blindly idolize and live in the past in a way that doesn't really move art or culture or music anywhere.
Yeah, I've always said don't create history because it's been done before. Create the future.
Yeah, man, absolutely. Like, you can worship the idols of the past and draw on those influences. You are standing on the shoulder of many giants. But there's no reason you're not going to create a better Slipknot album than Slipknot. You know what I mean? To use them as a reference as well. So just do your own thing and forge your own path.
Of course, definitely. So before we go, I want to thank you so much for your time today. I really appreciate it. Obviously thanks to a certain virus that shall not be named. Obviously, shows aren't happening at the moment, but I'd imagine when all this is over, and yes, it will eventually be over, we'll be seeing Des Rocs on the road quite a bit, right? Any New York City gigs we could be expecting soon?
Hell yeah, man. The second they're going to let me, I'll be on the stage anywhere I can be. So New York City will be target number one, for sure.
Awesome. We got to find like some of these abandoned places now and just turn them into DIY venues.
Yeah, dude, there might be like a whole kind of rebirth of that movement, without a doubt. Especially with like if rents go down and shit, you know?
Oh, absolutely. I see that happening 100%.
Oh, yeah.
Awesome. But thank you so much, everybody. We are here with Des Rocs. Be sure to check out the new singles, I Know and Wayne. If you haven't already, this is Alex from Heavy New York, and we will see you next time.